Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. We got a little bit of news in EVE Online this week. It's actually pretty lucky because CCP just came out with an article about their next update, which is going to focus a lot on wormhole space. I haven't really seen anything very dramatic there, no big changes, but they're basically going to try to increase connectivity between wormholes to make it more dynamic, I guess. They're also going to hold the Guardians Gala inside wormhole space, so that's where we'll have sites that will potentially yield us a new set of implants as well. Very interesting, of course, and they're also planning to do something about some of the drifter behavior and to have increased PvP loot drops for a small amount of time, because the event actually doesn't run for very long. This does really feel like CCP is trying stuff out, and well, in wormhole space I kind of feel better than in low-sec, because well, there's no local, and you know from experience at least that there's a decent chance that a wormhole might be empty when you find it. So I think that one is pretty interesting. Their attempts to get like other players that would normally not take part in PvP into dangerous spaces to take part in PvE that can be juicy, and then into PvP as well, of course. I feel like last time all the reports I saw about the low-sec event is that the juice was basically not worth the squeeze. It was a pretty hard site to do, so you had to commit to a decently good or specified ship in order to get there. So whenever you got into a PvP situation, I don't really see how you would be able to get out of that as like a high-sec care bear or as a newer player. So I would say that the important part as well is what kind of a ship is needed in order to run the site, or that can run the site. Maybe that can be important as well. If you want to get alpha clones and things like, and really new players involved, I think up to a Tech 1 cruiser is where I would put that balance. And if you want to just, you know, get the high-sec care bears that already have a decent wallet and things like that, Tech 1 battle cruiser, maybe Tech 1 battleship is my personal like limit. I'm not going to risk my conduit running rattlesnake in low-sec or in wormhole space to run an event site or something like that, for instance. At least that's my thinking process on that. I would love to hear yours, of course. Something else, CCP gave us the result for the Plex for Good drive, $107,000, pretty damn impressive. Very nicely done, everyone. And there was one last bit of news. Oh yeah, the connectivity issues, of course. For me personally, it's been better generally speaking, although I also completely lost chat one evening, and I just got a disconnect here as I'm trying to make EVE Talk. So it's not 100% yet. I feel like most of the evenings it's been more normal, more stable, but there's still some hiccups that I detect as well. That means that we're going to take a look at the new Eden store next, and let's hope that everything holds up. We're seeing the Blackfire Seal skins still front and center. Some of those Serenity skins still showing up here, and I'm not seeing the sales just yet. They also did notice in the post about the next update that there would be a sale for skins that are for ships that are used quite often in wormhole space. But yeah, we're not detecting anything too special there, so we are moving straight on to the markets. And as always, we start with some Plex and stuff. That's going to be at 405. There we go. Let's get started with Plex themselves. A bit of a surprise to me. 3.4 million for the sellers in Jita, 3,250,000 for the buyers in Jita. Yeah, basically more sellers coming in, driving the price down a little bit from last week. And that looks like more hesitation on the chart here. Although we are above that 325 million on the average mark, there's no clear trend. The 20-day moving average is still going up, but it is basically now meeting the daily and 5-day moving averages. So all of that looks to be flat right now. I thought we had the counter move started. I thought that we had basically found our bottom range here, and that we would start to move in the opposite direction as FanFest does start to approach, of course, but there is no sign of that just yet. Very good news, of course, for people that want to invest in Plex or that at the moment want to Plex their account or want to pay their subscription through the in-game Plex purchases. At the moment, looking at this 1 year chart, it is very, very affordable. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificates that do make a jump up to 1.6 billion on the chart. Very interesting. Very noticeable as well how the volumes have dried up here. Excuse me, how the volumes have dried up here on these sales, and that the price makes a jump there. This does, to me, indicate that like some of the stocks have basically depleted, and yeah, you can see that in the sales in GTA as well. 1.7 billion almost for the sellers, almost 1.6 billion for the buyers. They are being forced up here, and then outside of GTA, oh, I should also look at that for Plex. We'll do that in just a moment. Just above 1.6 billion for the sellers, and the buyers are competing at the same range. Plex sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. So we had 3.4 million in GTA, just below 3.4 million as well. So there's definitely a little bit of dumping in GTA that happened, that drove the average prices down a little bit, or those average sell prices down a little bit, and they're basically meeting their competition in the player-owned trade hubs at that range. Buyers, nothing special outside of GTA to report either. It's like just below 3.3 million, and then you get some, let's see if I can actually, we gotta go down quite a little bit, but here we go. From time to time you see some station buy orders that compete not that far from the best buy orders in the player-owned trade hubs. After that, let's take a look at the skill extractors, because those of course could be an indication of what Plex is going to do, and you can clearly see that hesitation here as well. In fact, the 5-day moving average, which for Plex has been like really flat and looked like it might be going up last week. Well, here we actually have a decrease in that 5-day moving average. We're really meeting the 20-day just above 380 million on the average side. The sellers in the player-owned trade hubs, 376 million. In GTA, 390 million. So it does mean that you get some sales going here in GTA for that price as well. And then the buyers are at 373 million, closing down that margin very much. This is, in my opinion, again confirming that hesitation that we're seeing in the market. It doesn't really know which way to go. Everything is converging, margins are going down, and we could really go either way. Like one sale from CCP could bring us a lot of supply that could crash the price back down to new lows, to 1 year lows if you look at this 1 year chart here, or more interest in the game, some announcements, maybe some stuff around FanFest could then have the exact opposite effect, increase demand substantially, and then we could see the opposite effect. So here it's really a wait and see pattern. I personally do like the fact that we're basically at the low point for the year. If you're looking to buy, I don't think you're making a mistake. That leads us to the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that are just recovering from another 1 year low point below 800 million ISK on the chart. That means that the sellers are up to 816 million. In GTA, they're at 855. That's very unusual. That's a super big difference between the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs and the sellers in GTA. That's quite massive. And the buyers, they're at 787, below 800 million, so you're still able to grab some, well, if you look at this 1 year chart, really cheap large scale injectors by putting up an aggressive buy order that heads towards that 800 million. It is going to trigger, in my opinion, especially when you look at the price for the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. But that's a big difference here. That does mean that we've got some more volatility in the large-scale injector market, in my opinion, which is also shown here as well. We just went to a 1 year low point. We're recovering from that, and so it's going to be really interesting to see what this one will do. If you're looking for that larger investment, basically what you could compare to a gold investment in real life, your protection against inflation, but with potentially an edge of speculation, then this would be it. Of course, the large scale injector is tied very strongly to Plex because you need skill extractors in order to produce these. And of course, as ISK inflates in the game, Plex tends to go up in price alongside it, or in a similar measure, and as a result you get that hedge against inflation. But gambling on what I would call success in the game, a higher need, a higher demand for skill points themselves, which at the moment CCP has of course crushed quite heavily with all of the free SP and all of the extra SP that they've given throughout all the events, the gifts and things like that. But if you're gambling on a comeback on that front as well, then you could really have the best of both worlds. You've got something that is protected and that will rise as inflation goes up, and if CCP then decides to turn off the spigot of all of the SP that they've been giving to the players, then this might make a very big comeback in that way as well. For the small skill injectors, we have a similar situation, only now are we bouncing back off from not yet a 1 year low point that was at 160 million, but we definitely went very close to 165 million here. Looking at the charts, and in fact the sellers are still at 166 million, buyers at 155. That means that you can buy these small skill injectors, in my opinion, for less than 160 million without too much trouble. And then if we look at the difference with Jita, again, it's not as massive, but we go up to 173 million in Jita station for the sellers of small skill injectors. And so the 160 million, you can clearly see that is still that 1 year low point. If you can grab them at that price, again, you're below the entire chart. I think it makes sense, and this can be seen in the same light as the large skill injectors, except of course it's for a much smaller ISK number. Which of course, if this goes up 50%, and if this goes up, if one of these go up 50%, you'd love to have a large scale injector, because that's a pretty sizable amount in one go, of course. This is just me speedballing, but if you make the same investment in skill injectors in ISK value, it should amount to the exact same thing, but it really depends. Some people prefer the large skill injectors over the small skill injectors. I'm not sure if it's exactly everything that scales in the same way, including the diminishing returns and things like that. I don't know. Normally it should be the exact same thing. I personally would say a couple of large skill injectors, there's your couple billion ISK investment pretty much, and that should set you up nice for your diversification. What do we still have left? We have the daily alpha injectors that are also clearly struggling right now. We went down in the volumes and finally broke that 40 million mark on the chart, and look at that, way back down straight away, down to 45 million for the sellers, but still 39 million for the buyers. And then if we go to the player owned trade hubs, still 45 million, excuse me, and here it is, 45 million, yeah, for the buyers. This is very weird to see these average prices below 40 million, and that means that people are not buying from these sellers, and in fact there is people that are just dumping this straight to these buy orders for 39 million ISK, which is, well, very, very low as well. Here we, of course, we do have to give one warning. This is not just a straight step down from large scale injector to small scale injector to daily alpha injector. This is its unique market. You can see that in the name. Only alpha clones can use these daily alpha injectors, and for a limited amount of time. So we are talking a different market from the large and small scale injectors. Investing here, I think, still makes sense if you look at this 1 year chart, but it is not necessarily going to be as profitable, or have the same reaction to changes in the game as the large and small scale injectors. So be careful with that. And that leaves us with our final product, which is the hypercores, that is landing on 360,000 ISK apparently. Let's take a look at the sellers. 357, 58, 59, something like that for the sellers. Buyers are forced up to 330 plus thousand ISK, not million. Quite a bit more, quite a bit cheaper, of course, but you need a lot more of them for the Hypernet relay. And honestly, it is something that I've been able to do without any problem. Hasn't bothered me, haven't used it. The Hypernet relay, gambling just isn't my forte. We do still see the spamming of the Hypernet relay that has basically completely taken over the old contract spam in EVE Online. And I mean, yeah, At the moment, for me, it doesn't feel like it's an oppressive problem that is so visually appealing that gamblers are going to have a major problem avoiding this, and it is being used, I think, for what we expected. Of course, there's some scams in there, some really bad things, but it's mostly to try and sell some items that are generally harder to sell on the regular market or through the contracts. And so I think it's okay. I would love to have numbers on this, but I'm not sure if CCP is ever going to release those. That means that we get to move on to the mineral market, coming in at 1510. And here, of course, if you saw the ticker below, we have some bad news. If we go to Cheetah Station, you can see that the sellers are starting to come in the 620 range for titanium. Buyers are just below 6 ISK, so that margin has closed substantially. And you can see here we are struggling to get back above 6.5 ISK on the chart as well. Now, it is good that we're moving between 6 and 6.5, make that the new range. That looks pretty good, but the bad news is I thought we would be able to get to that 6.5 mark and maybe even get a slightly above that. It clearly indicates that once we reach that 6.5, we have seen quite a bit of dumping in the amounts, and I am wondering if Nelsec is not slowly adapting to their new situation as well. They have, not necessarily they have a different supply in basically ore compositions now in their main belts, but perhaps they are now starting to tweak their moon mining operations as well to counter what CCP has done. It would only be natural. They don't want to start to import very expensive titanium from HiSec in order to keep their production lines going. So it is entirely possible that we'll actually go back through the 6 ISK mark, and I'm actually a little bit afraid of that because the buyers are already there, 598 and then 593, so we're going down pretty damn quickly here. Look at the volumes, 120 million to 70 million, and then here we get 1.2 billion being dumped at 627, and down here we get another billion being dumped at 639. So if we look at that for that 640 mark, we get another 1.5 billion here, we get another 2 billion here, and we're still at the 646, another 2 billion here. And so all of this is quite a bit of supply, quite a bit of dumping, trying to get those better prices for their titanium, while the demand, of course, doesn't necessarily have to move that quickly. So it's quite interesting to see. I'm seeing quite a bit of pressure here, and I do wonder if we'll be able to maintain the 6 ISK mark, which I would still consider to be very reasonable to sell your titanium at, but not easily defended, I think. After that, we've got the pyrite market that manages to do another little jump up to 5.5 ISK this time, giving away a little bit of ground at the tail end, but very impressive continuous rise for practically a whole year. It's 538 for the sellers and 523 for the buyers. A little bit of dumping, I guess, as well, as we reach a 1-year high point for pyrite. How long has that's been a very long time since we can say, all right, we actually reach a 1-year high point in what looks like is a somewhat sustainable way as well, up to 5.5 ISK. Very, very interesting chart, of course, for something that has been very terrible for such a long time. But we went from 4 to 5.5 ISK, not a massive increase or anything like that, but it is nice to see, of course, a slight recovery in the price of pyrite, which, by the way, used to be more expensive than titanium. So we definitely still have a ways to go to get back to the good old days. After that, we have the Mexalon chart that is trying to hold on to 55 ISK, but is also failing at that at the tail end. Sellers are still at 56, but buyers have gone down to 51.66. And you can see the pressure here as well. Of course, quite a bit of selling happening. 240 million units here, 260 million units here, getting that below 57 ISK. At 58 here, we get 138, another 45, another 30. Yeah, it's people naturally trying to finally take advantage of slightly better prices in the mineral market, and that means that we will get a counter push, a bit of oversupply that happens. It is practically inevitable. The real question is what I said with the titanium market. Is Nelsec basically able to tweak their own outputs more through their moon mining activities so that they can basically limit the gains that we in HiSec can make for our HiSec minerals? That's going to be the real question longer term. After that, we've got the isogen market. Didn't get to a 1-year low point, but did get to very close to 13.5 ISK here, and is now basically meandering in that below average range for the year. 1440 for the sellers, 1371 for the buyers. There's really not that much to say except that isogen is the biggest casualty of all the minerals when it comes to all of the changes that CCP has done in the last couple of years to mining ships, moon mining as well. All of that stuff has just made it too plentiful. Isogen used to be more expensive by megasite, and this is a very sad situation for the mineral itself. It also makes it the biggest gamble that you can take. If you invest in isogen at 15 ISK or below 15 ISK and you expect CCP at some point to say, we want to see that mineral make a comeback, it is ridiculous how badly it is doing compared to, for instance, Mixelon, that is more plentiful normally in all the mineral mixes in the ore compositions. Then this could be the gamble to take, of course. If there's one mineral that CCP might want to see a comeback on, it would be this one. On the other hand, CCP might be happy with just a relatively small comeback because they might want to keep Tech 1 ships pretty stable and inexpensive. So those are probably the two forces that have to decide on what to do with the price of minerals. In general, CCP can very easily manipulate all of this, but they're not too hands-on, of course, as we all know. For the high-SiC minerals, we've got Noxium, a second step up towards 275, trying to get back to that normal. 300 ISK doesn't seem to be possible, and you can see the reaction, of course. We reach a 2-3 month high point, look at the volume increase, and then the response, of course, back down towards 250. So sellers are now at 273 ISK, buyers are at 236, and yeah, last 24 hours full front page. So you can see that in the last couple of days we do go back very quickly from that 275 range, and even on a couple of days 286. People say that's too good to pass up for Noxium, so you get those volume increases and that drive pressure on the price. After that, we have the Zydrine market that's alright, doing a second bounce off of the 500 ISK mark, trying to get back to that 550. Not bad, of course. 545 for the sellers, 491 for the buyers. Very noticeable that those buyers are saying, we're staying below 500 ISK, you sellers can do whatever the hell you want. We know that you are regularly bringing in quite a bit of Zydrine, and you can see that last 24 hours, we're still in the last 24 hours here, we're still in the last 24 hours here. It is that pattern. People that moon mine in the 0.5 systems, they make a couple 100,000, 4 million, 1.3 million. Here's someone with 24 million units that came in. That's a bigger seller, probably an investor that is trying to take advantage of the slightly higher prices. Well, 500 to 550, that's like a 10% profit that you can take, of course. Another 5 million. So we have this, there is plentiful supply of Zydrine. Okay, let's hope that my voice keeps up here. But yeah, there's plenty. I'm actually gonna drink a little bit. There we go, sorry about that. But yeah, there's plenty full supply when it comes to Zydrine, and there is no need for the buyers to basically drive the price up when they can just have a little bit of patience, and eventually they'll grab that anyways. After that, we have the megasite market that is continuing the downtrend here. Very interesting to see the difference with Zydrine able to ask 500, 550 ISK for this mineral, and megasite, which historically was always more expensive than Zydrine, just not cutting it, going back down towards that lower range. Not yet a 1 year low point, that's around 300 ISK, but we're getting close to 350 again. 360 ISK for the sellers, 341 for the buyers, and that is when there is oversupply. You still have the very same pattern, right? You still have quite a few sellers that are bringing in hundreds of thousands, couple of million of units, but it is still just too much for the market, so it is just continuously driving the price back down until finally we have enough competition there to get those bouncy behaviors back in the market. And megasite, unfortunately, is still not there. For the final mineral, we've got morphite, of course, that is continuing to stay well above average, around 12,500 on the chart, doing really well. 12,900 in fact for the sellers, almost 13,000 ISK. That's definitely a great price for sellers. 11,830 if anyone is looking to invest in Morphyte. This is really not the time. Less than 10,000 ISK for the buyers. That's where, to me personally and historically, it starts to look interesting. Of course, keep in mind Morphyte is different from all the other minerals because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy, not the Tech 1 economy. That means we get to move on to the PI market at 2440. Let's take a look here. A couple of weeks ago it looked like demand was coming back and some of these were making their way back to the average ranges, and then last week it really fell through, so it doesn't look like that was a pattern. Let's see what's happening here. Broadcast nodes went back to a little bit below average, but is basically super stable around that 2 million range at the moment. 2.1 million for the sellers, 1.9 million for the buyers. That is basically really not much to say. Advanced PI materials are in a pretty stable spot right now. You can try to buy for the lower prices. If you're looking for that investment in advanced PI, I definitely recommend go for those buy orders. Have a little bit of patience. There's no need to rush that anyways, and the gamble that you're taking, of course, is that CCP does eventually come out with a new structure that requires advanced PI materials. Then you can potentially make some ISK on that. Then here we had that pattern for the construction blocks. It was really promising when this one went back to 12,000 ISK above its average price. Had to give back some ground. That's kind of normal, and now you can see we're trying to get back to that 11k, 11,700 for the sellers, 9,900 for the buyers. It's still showing a very big margin between sellers and buyers, and thus a bit of a lack of demand, but at least sellers are back to their average price. That one did really well to get back. But then consumer electronics, you can clearly see normally we'd expect 12,500 ISK. We fell down to a lower range in the fall slump. That was a general thing in the PI market, and we are just not getting back here for consumer electronics. In fact, we're playing with a new range, 10 to 11,000 ISK now. That's really not good. All right. We seem to be in a slight upswing. We're back to 12,000 ISK all of a sudden for the sellers, but those buyers are still at 9,700 ISK. Very wide margin, even for a sell price that is 500 ISK below the average. We get pretty quickly, right? 3 orders and we're at 12,600. So we could be in for a comeback, but it will require more demand to come into the PI market, and it is still just not there. For the coolants market, we had a pretty decent performance across the year. This is tied to fuels, of course, so that one has probably a more stable demand than some of the other PI materials, and as a result we had a pretty good performance for most of the year, I would say. Here at the tail end though, a bit of a slump down to 11,000 ISK, and then already we see some data points that we are recovering from that. Sellers are at 12,500 ISK. Most are actually going towards 13,000 ISK pretty quickly, and now we get 10,800 ISK. We have that same pattern, except there is more demand, and as a result we can get our average prices and even slightly above average prices on some occasions. So it's the same thing, except it's not as bad as some of the other PI materials in most fuel related PI materials. Cryoprotectant solutions, of course, the oddball out because it is tied to the production of the new implants for the Triglavian weapon system. So we have a double spike up to 180,000 ISK. We're going back down now, landing at 130, 137 for the sellers, 123 for the buyers. And basically, you're still paying a premium for the cryoprotectant solutions, but it's only on new releases or when some new stuff comes out from CCP that we get those jumps towards, well, very nice jump up, like 30-40% or so, 280,000 ISK. There's definitely ISK to make in producing cryoprotectant solutions at the moment. Enriched uranium tied to fuels, able to defend that 14,000 ISK range pretty damn well. 14,100 for the sellers, but 12,800 for the buyers. well, a slightly higher margin than what we're used to. So again, showing that demand seems to be the issue here. For the integrity response drones, we have a nice little bubble up to 2.5 million. We're already back down, and here I think that we'll see that on more supply. It's 2.4 million. It's actually quite reasonable. Buyers at 2.2 million. We do see like a full front page of new supply, and then just a couple of days ago we have been filling that gap from above 2.5 million very quickly to a more normal 2.4 million. So basically this is just bringing integrity response drones back to its normal range, and right now on all of that fresh supply, I guess buyers are somewhat winning out for new producers, and so we get a little bit of a bump down here, but I think we'll recover and get back above that 2.25 without too much trouble. Mechanical parts next, 11,000 average. We had to give, you know, just about 10 days ago or a couple of weeks ago, we did break through that on the low side of it. We're on our way to recovering again. So this is very similar to what we see right here at tail end in coolants. And then for the mechanical parts, you also have this bounce down to 10k, but then we're immediately recovering in just a couple days. Yep, 11,500 for the sellers, back on its average, 9,900 for the buyers. Again, that large margin that is indicating a lack of demand. Organic mortar applicators slowly trending below 1 million ISK. So this one is actually trading below average. I would say 1 million for the sellers, 900,000 for the buyers. If you're looking for that advanced PI material investment, 900,000 for the buyers. This one, if you can grab it, then you do buy these mortar applicators below the entire chart. It makes sense to me. If you want to in some small numbers. I in fact have some advanced PI materials that I bought over the summer in some small numbers, which, you know, if you look at this chart, it's a bit of a mistake, but keep in mind it's like 1 million to 1.1 million. It's not that big of a difference right now, especially if you bought for some of these buyers. It's a longer term thing, of course, hoping for another structure. After that, we get our robotics chart, which has definitely moved to a low range as well now, 90,000 ISK, and we're just bouncing around that. 95,000 for the sellers, 88,000 for the buyers, clearly below average. And it's the same story, except here suppliers are forced to get that price below average as well. If they want their sales, it's showing a lack of demand. Self-harmonizing power cores, let's take a look at those. Also a bit of a spike here, up to like 2.5 million even on a day, but a very quick recovery, and we're back on that normal 2 million on the chart. It's just above 2 million for the sellers and just below 2 million for the buyers. Super narrow margin here. That is basically the price for self-harmonizing power cores. There's not even room for some speculation or trying to grab some of the cheaper ones. It's just 2 million. That's it. That's what you're paying for self-harmonizing power cores. The superconductors, something that I'm producing, so I'm very interested in finally seeing a comeback here. The good news is we do see a bit of a comeback in the last week or so, but it is not yet at the 12,500 range that I would call the average. Sellers are there though, 12,800. That's interesting. Buyers 11,129. So again, that wide margin between sellers and buyers, showing that despite the fact that the sellers are back to their normal range, buyers just aren't in the market yet, and it is very difficult to actually get back to that average range for the prices. Buyers are winning out at this point, and they get the cheaper superconductors. So very difficult to decide, yeah, all right, I'm gonna start to dump, because you're just gonna crash the situation right now. You're just gonna crash this price recovery in no time. So I'm still not going to dump all the superconductors that I've been making in the last couple of months. Test cultures next, had that nice comeback up to 10,000 ISK, which, you know, for a refined PI material is not that great. And right here at the tail end, big volume spike, price going down. We have some dumping happening, although the sellers are able to stay at 11,270. The buyers are down to 7,800 ISK. So my guess is someone was really impatient, got quite a bit of test cultures to JITA, and then just dumped it straight to these buy orders, because that is a massive margin that once again confirms the current situation, in my opinion, for the PI market. Supplies are quite okay, and we're trying to sell at normal prices. Demand just isn't there. The buyers are able to go really low and sometimes even successfully grab these super cheap PI products. Finally, we get to wetware mainframes that managed to get up to 2.5 million as well. You know, a little bit of of a spike right here in January. We're basically recovering from that. 2.2 million is probably its average price. It's 2.3 million for the sellers and 2.2 million for the buyers. We're just a touch above average for the wetware mainframes, but the general trend is still the same in PI. We are lacking in demand. Let's move on to the advanced moon materials then, coming in at 34.05. Like that, and yeah, we'll take a look at what's happening here. Crystalline carbonites actually went to a 170 range, doing really well to ask a price that's well above average. Right now, of course, you know, we're back on that 150 range, I think. 152 for the sellers, 146 for the buyers. Really narrow margin all of a sudden, so there is definitely some volatility in this market. Once a price becomes high enough, we get people selling or trying to sell, and then we go back to that 150 range very quickly. It's still average, I would say, but your sell opportunity is basically over. Ferrite carbide is, you know, losing its volatility apparently and settling below 140. That's a bit worrying. 137 for the sellers and 132 for the buyers. That is a below average price. Definitely not the time to be selling anymore. After that, we get our titanium carbide that is very flat, below average as well, I would say, at 175. So here 180 for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. The margin is narrowing, so here we could be primed for going in either direction, right? You could have more supply and crash to 1 year low point where you could invest, or we could see demand pick up for Tech 2 ships or Tech 2 production in general, and as a result we could see prices go back up. Very narrow margin, then we're set to potentially go either way, but clearly for titanium carbide we've been there for a couple months now, so it's going to be difficult to see exactly which way we're going. And titanium carbide is actually I would call that pretty low as well, considering its 1 year chart at around 175, 180 for the sellers, 174. It's basically the same thing. So losing ground on crystalline and ferrite, and then yeah, stable below average for titanium and tungsten. Let's take a look at the metamaterials next. Photonic metamaterials, 1 year low point. That is quite a surprise considering the spike we just had in crystalline carbonites, but it is the situation. We're at less than 15,000 ISK on the chart, 15,000 for the sellers, 14,500 for the buyers. If you're looking for an advanced moon material investment, this one would make sense, of course, considering the charts. It is tied to Galente ship production, so you know, make your own choice. Do you think that one will somehow make a comeback, or are there reasons to expect them to like get above or something? Maybe a rapid fire treatment. I personally don't see it. Drones are still super versatile, one of the most powerful weapon systems, and Galente are of course known for that, so I don't see it myself, but if you do expect it, then this one does make a lot of sense. Plasmonic metamaterials next. Alright, giving back some ground as well, but staying above 20,000 ISK. I would still call that decently good. Almost 22,000 in fact for the sellers and 20,000 for the buyers. So that's stable right in the middle, probably boosted by that rapid fire change that did give them something to work with, of course, in the Minotaur ships. For titanium carbide, we are, you know, just like with, oh, it's carbide, so I've got to go for non-linear metamaterials, excuse me. All right, actually I was expecting this to be flat on 22,500 as well. No, we actually have a move up back to 25,000, back to an average range. Almost 25,000 is 24,900 for the sellers and 23,000 to 22,000 for the buyers, so be careful. We could go back down very quickly, but this does seem to indicate some interest in Caldari Tech 2 ship production. Interesting. Then we have the terahertz metamaterials. This one, yeah, if we disregard or basically try to normalize these two spikes, then you can clearly see that we are on a below average range, just like its carbide equivalent, which is right here. You know, a bit of volatility, but clearly we are not trading very high on this one, so it looks like there's a bit of a lack in the Mars ships at the moment, creating opportunities from time to time, but for that we would need to see 17,500 for the sellers. We're definitely not there. 21,000 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers, so that's a super narrow margin on a less than average price. Let's take a look at the other advanced moon materials. Fermionic condensates flat at 90,000. This really not that much to say. Slightly below average, but doing nicely in my opinion to defend this range. Ferrogel below average here as well, so too late to buy. Definitely not a place to sell. Fullerides, actually a slight move up in Fullerides, getting back above 1,000 disc. That was pretty damn good news, so we had a slight sell opportunity. It's still at 1,100 for the sellers and 1,000 for the buyers, but trending down already, of course, on this sell opportunity. Hypersynaptic fibers right around its average. This honestly does not seem the right place to sell or buy. Nanotransistors, same thing right now, 5,500 discs, sure. Historically, we're talking 5,000 discs, and we had that super strong summer on a complete lack of supply. A bit of volatility that created opportunity, but now I unfortunately think that's over. 5,500, you can see we get a decent amount of supply. 5,250, we get a decent amount of demand, although not that much, above 5K. So we're set to maybe go back down a little bit, but I don't expect spikes up to 6,000 discs to come back anytime soon. Phenolic composites able to defend 2,000 disc without too much trouble. That's pretty impressive actually. 2,181 for the sellers and 2,050 for the buyers. Not bad, definitely a nice margin I think compared to some of the other advanced moon materials. And then finally the ceramic fibers, also sitting just below its average or around its average. Again, the in-between spot, which we don't like. Let's hope that we find some more opportunities in the Tick 2 sheep market. That one's coming in at 40.20. Like that. All right, so let's get started as always with the Aries, which has known a spike not that long ago in early January up to 35 million. We are going back down very quickly. Of course, on such an opportunity you generally do get a little bit of oversupply. 25 million, we need to be substantially below that for the buyers, and we are. 26 million for the sellers, 22.6 million for the buyers. One thing that's still scary, last 24 hours, 300 units, 152 units down here. That is way too much, so I would say dare to wait even longer and wait for the buyers to go even lower, maybe even in the 20 million range, although pretty much all the buyers are above the 22.5 million at the moment, so you're definitely competing with the low end of what's been possible historically speaking. That's a lot of ships in the last 24 hours to still dump, despite the fact that we're this much down on the sell prices. So we'll have to wait and see. I personally do think that a little bit of patience might be the right move here. The Basilisk is able to stay right around its average, 230, maybe a bit below that. Yeah, it's 220 now for the sellers, actually a decent amount below that. 205 million for the first seller though. That one is still quite a bit too aggressive for me. You can clearly tell that the bottom can be substantially below 200 million, so that's too early as well, I would say, to start to invest here. Cerberus, that one is more interesting. Love this behavior. Spike up to 280, go back down to 200, spike up to 300 million. I did like a halfway trade on this increase in price right here. And now look at that, crashing back down towards 200 million again. Buyers is going to be interesting. 216 for the sellers, 190 just above that for the buyers. I'll show you guys my did I put it in here or is it still in try? Yep, there we go. I bought Cerberus for 195 and I sold for 249. So this is a trade that was pretty easy to do in my opinion. I even sold way too soon. I could have gotten a hell of a lot more out of the sell price, so we could have gotten a better margin, but we're already there. 190 million for the buyers. 195 is pretty aggressive, but obviously if you want to have a good chance at the trade, you gotta be a little bit aggressive on both the buy and the sell, but it is very much possible right now. So Cerberus is, yes, I might even come back and try my hand at another gamble here as well. Another thing to keep in mind, Guardian's Gala is coming. It's going to be in wormhole space. The Cerberus does tend to be one of those event running ships that can have like this super strong tank, missiles. Does it have drones? I think it's got some drones as well. Attributes, yeah, it's got a couple of small drones as well, so potentially this could see a spike in the Cerberus. It's a total gamble on my part, but it could be very interesting. Next up here, we've got the Crow flat above 27.5 million. So that's a no for me. 28 million for the sellers, above 25 million for the buyers. No, that's definitely too expensive. The Guardian actually doing a little bit of a jump back above its average range of 230, 240 now, 239. Let's be fair, 239 million for the sellers and still 199 for the buyers. Haven't I made a trade? Let's take a look at that here. Yep, Guardian, yeah, that's still definitely too early. I bought for 180 and I sold for 239. So we'd need to see quite a bit more supply. We'd need to see the buyers go a lot lower as well before I would make a move here. Then we have the Hawk that suddenly spikes. Oh yeah, that was a suggestion, of course. I think last week we had this spike up to 60 million ISK here. We're now recovering, but we're still at 44 million for the sellers and 40 million for the first buyer. 36 for most. 35 million seems to be the bottom here. Let's see how volatile this pushback down is going to be. And if an opportunity close to 30 million is what I would call it, can be formed here in the Hawk. So very interesting, of course, but right now, yeah, this is not where we want to buy. Then we've got the Heretic that is slowly climbing its way out of its slump from 60 million ISK. So here we're seeing 79 million now for the sellers, 53 million for the buyers, and that for the interdictors is unfortunately still confirming the pattern. We're going up in price because, well, we're not seeing any more ships being brought to the market. That's basically what's happening here. 8 jumps out, we get some more at 75 million. Yeah, trade volumes should be absolutely abysmal here. On the other hand, I'm seeing like 25 a day. Does that mean that people are? Yeah, because the buyers have gotten more aggressive. I actually put up a buy price for like 50 million, trying to get a really good deal out of that. You can see people are bidding each other up, trying to get them to 53 million. So interesting, the lack of supply is slowly bidding the buy prices up, but the margin is still huge. 53 million is still below the entire chart. So this trade is still just completely dead. The average high prices are this high because there is zero supply, and it is only super slowly forcing the buyers up, and they're just not willing to go anywhere. Next up here we've got the Hound that is landing on 30 million, so that's probably not where we want to be for buying either. 32 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Yeah, you can clearly see that that is not the right spot. The Ishtar showed some pressure last week, is still doing so, but is actually not breaking the 230 million mark. Too well. 228 million for the sellers, 208 for the buyers. Still too early in my opinion as well. Manticore just below 30 million. So here again, 29 for the sellers, 26 for the buyers. That is still not the place to buy and sell either. The Munin did really well to go back towards the 280 million range on 2 occasions in the last month. Right now we're just going back down from that, but 243 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. That's also a big no for me for trying to buy that. Nemesis, same thing, well above 25 million, 26 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. We could get there on a lot of supply. It's half a page, it's not that unreasonable. I think we need more patience here as well. Okay, that's unfortunate. Then we get the Oneros staying around the 2 million range, 200 for the sellers, and buyers forced up towards 190. That's not the place either. The Purifier below 30 million. If the buyers are low enough, it could be interesting, but I don't expect it. Yeah, 30 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. So demand has come back a little bit. It's driving the margins down substantially, and I'm just not seeing it this week. Saber though, that one is on the average down to less than 62 million ISK. It's 62.2 for the sellers and 56 million for the buyers. And this is the complete difference, of course. You've got no heretics being bought, but you get this lovely upswing. Are you going to be able to take advantage of that? Next to no, because the volumes are nowhere. And then for the Saber, you have what looks like a buy opportunity, but it's just on more supply, and buyers are still at like 56, 55. Couple of them are trying to finally invest a little bit in some of these Sabers. But yeah, they're buying below 60 million ISK, so who is going to do that? Who is going to sell you a Saber at that price? It's very difficult to see. So this is really a difficult market right now, the interdictor market. It does look very interesting, of course, but I think the chance that you're going to be able to either grab one below 60 and actually sell here for 70 is going to be very, very slim. Next up here we get the Scimitar. staying above 200 million ISK as well. 210 for the sellers, 191 for the buyers. Yeah, that's not really big enough margin. And then the ZAR mast is actually pretty low at the moment at 300 million ISK. 307 for the sellers, 280 for the buyers. It is of course a newer ship, so it's hard to say exactly how this market is going to evolve. We also know that generally speaking, the emerging countries is still a pretty big floodgate for production, or at least a part of the production of the ZAR mast. So I would be very hesitant to already go on the speculative tour here. It is going to be interesting, I think, to keep an eye on it, just to get a feel of what's happening with the Triglavian ship production, how big it is starting to be, and things like that. Next up, Tech Tree ships. Let's take a look at those at 49.15. Like that, and let's go. Confessor, of course, back towards 37.5 million and still edging up, I would say, in the last couple of days. It's 38.4 for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. One bit of bad news here, 118 being dumped. That's a little bit more than what we want to see. On the other hand, it's only 3 sell orders in the last 24 hours, so they're already being very careful here with the Confessor market. If we keep seeing those kind of sell orders, we gotta be on our toes for oversupply and potentially another one of these buy opportunities. But for now, it doesn't feel like it is that crazy. It's also, well, it's actually the cheapest one, so it's kind of weird to see that here. The Hecate is now slowly landing on that 40 million range, which I would call a normal range for these ships. 41 million for the sellers, 37.7 million for the buyers here. We've got a full front page, but nothing in the hundreds. 56 is quite a bit, 31, everything else is quite in line with, I would say, a normal volume 4, something that still has a 1 million premium on that 40 million range. So it's definitely still more expensive than the Confessor, so seeing more sell orders for slightly higher volumes is normal. Yeah, this is an odd one out here, the 118 for that Confessor. Let's see what the Jackdaw is doing. The Jackdaw, ooh, that is very interesting. Not even on that much of a volume spike, although it's 3 days of well above average. We've got 500 compared to 250 on a normal range, and we just spiked up to 78 million ISK for the sellers of the Jackdaw, 51 million for the buyers. They have been forced substantially as well. If you have some Jackdaws lying around that you want to sell for a profit, this is definitely the time to do so. I don't think that this will last very long, but this is completely out of the blue for me. I wonder, is it like a nullsic entity that bought for some massive fleets, feeling like the Jackdaw is what they need? I think that that's my personal expectation on what happened here. This is going to be very interesting in the upcoming weeks to see how quickly this goes back down, how quickly the industry side of these tactical destroyers is going to respond to this, and what, of course, the effect is going to be on something like the Hecate and the Confessor. Who is going to make and bring Hecates and Confessors on the market when right now you can sell Jackdaws at such a huge premium? This is going to be very interesting. Let's see if there's an impact on the Zwepel. That one is going down in price a little bit. I think that this will completely stop. 37.7 million for the sellers and 32.5 million for the buyers. If you're feeling like you're risky and you want to take a gamble on this Jackdaw spike right now, then it, to me, looks like buying some Zwepels at 32.5 million could be the move to make. Of course, the expectation is here that quite a bit of production and focus is going to come to the Jackdaw. It's going to dry up a little bit of supply for the Confessor. This one already feels a bit too high, but that one can then make its push for 40 million. The Hecate can probably sustain itself decently well with the supply, but if there's anything that is going to be next to nothing, and you can already see that the volumes aren't there anymore, that might make a real push up, force buyers up, it would be this Zwepel. Admittedly, this is really gambling on the market mechanics here. This is investing with quite a bit of risk, I would say, but to me that does make sense. Am I gonna do it myself? I don't know. I might just see if I'm right on that theory for now, but this is super unexpected, and potentially it does, of course, create an opportunity. Let's take a look at the cruiser market next. We get the Legions pretty much flat at the 150 range. 153.4 in fact for the sellers, 134 for the buyers. Last 24 hours, full front page. That's well, okay. Actually, we're not driving the price down because of it. So this one, yeah, I don't know. The in-between space again. The Loki is actually doing really well, driving its price back up towards the 215 million, 197 for the buyers. You're definitely selling these at a nice premium at the moment, and full front page as a result. Nothing too crazy, so it does look like the Loki is gonna able to command that price for quite a bit, being the most expensive and most popular Tech 3 cruiser. Then we have some opposite moves here. The Proteus is bouncing back, but from a 1-year low point of 130 on average, back to 150 for the sellers, 130 still for the buyers. They're just not budging, so a bit of supply can very quickly drive the price here back up, and a little bit of buying as well can drive the price back down substantially. No, it's the opposite. A little bit of buying can drive the price back up, a little bit of supply can drive the price down very quickly. And then on the Tengu, we're actually on the downside of that, I think. Yep, here we go, down to the 150 million range on a couple of days of double supply. 150 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers, and here you can see 51.34. Then we're going to 155 with quite a few decent amount of ships, nothing too unreasonable. Yeah, as I've said, just a couple of ships here, a couple dozen ships can have a big impact and swing these prices very quickly either way. The Tengu, 140 million for the buyers. That on the chart, it still looks okay to buy them, basically, especially if you can fly them. Tech 3 cruisers, except for the Loki, look in a really decent spot. Something that is quite noticeable on the cruiser front here is that for the first time in quite a while, we actually have a difference in the ship behaviors. We've got the Proteus and the Tengu that are clearly at low points, and then we've got the Legion that's pretty much on its average, and then we actually have a Loki that's at a high point. So for most of the time we actually saw them move in tandem, reaching low points. Let's say right here in November, low point, Proteus gets to a low point, Tengu is at a low point, and then the Legion is clearly at a low point as well. Looks like that's over for some reason. That's maybe something that can be interesting as well. That would indicate that perhaps the manipulation attempts are over or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. We'll keep an eye on it in the upcoming weeks as always. And that leaves us to the extra product for the week. I'm gonna take another look at some faction battleships coming in at 56 minutes. 5600, there we go. I'm especially interested this week actually in the pirate battleships, because I wonder if the nerf to the emerging conduits has had an impact on the rattlesnake price. So let's start with those. Here is the Barghest going down slightly in price, going from 900 towards 800 million ISK, actually from slightly above average maybe to slightly below average. It's still 881 for the sellers, 807 for the buyers. Bit of a lack of demand. Considering that average price, it does mean that you can probably buy a Barghest from the buy orders. Pretty interesting, seeing a little bit of pressure here, but it looks like the Barghest is still very expensive, of course. The Macarial is actually reaching a 1-year low point. Where is this coming from? 450 million ISK here on the 5-day moving average. It's actually 515 for the sellers, 420 for the buyers. So the Macarial is up in price quite substantially. Not sure where this is coming from. If you have any information on that, feel free to post that in the comments. But this is a very clear move and an incredible sell opportunity all of a sudden. 380 million for most of the year for Macarial. I really regret now not having at least bought one and tried it. I was so happy with my Rattlesnake that I never felt the need, but the Macarial has that Angel Cartel warp speed advantage and things like that. So this would have been a trade that I could have made myself, going from 380 and now selling for 500 million ISK. That sounds like something that I would have liked to do. Unfortunate, but there it is. If any of you guys can sell or get Macarials to the market, it's definitely the time to do so. For the Nestor, we're basically just below 500 million ISK at this range, I think. 504 for the sellers, 465 for the buyers. It's a very, very nice platform, although in my opinion it is really the ship for people that fly multiple accounts at the same time. Because of the remote repping here, you can make an incredible spider tank with lots of drone damage. For the Nestor, I myself, prefer the Rattlesnake just because we get that massive passive tank and then the missile weapon system as well. But it's an incredible ship, I think, for like small corporations as well. Just set that up and you're super strong in tank right there. So 500 million is pretty much an average price apparently if you look at this one chart, and we're coming from 800 million almost in September. Let's keep that in mind. Here we get a Nightmare, slightly above average right now, going for more than 600 million ISK, 608 for the sellers, 530 for the buyers. I would definitely say that this is feeling like pirate faction battleships are really expensive, highly valued at the moment. Balgorn, maybe the least expensive one, which historically this was like a super expensive ship, the Balgorn. It is now going for 277 million ISK, 239 for the buyers. That feels like it's definitely affordable compared to the other ships. Let's see what it does, because all of these of course have some really potent PvE damage output. What are the traits of this ship? Bonus to stasis webifier optimal range does mean that you can like web at double the range, could be interesting. Energy Nosferatu energy neutralizer, PvE that's kinda useless. Large energy turret damage, will drain target ship's capacity regardless of your own capacitor level, so it always damages. This is definitely more of a PvP platform than a PvE platform, but still that double web range, and then with the large energy turrets, I wonder if there's a place for the Balgorn in the conduits. I may just try it because it's that much cheaper than all the other battleships at the moment. And then we move to the Rattlesnake that went to a high point of 900 million ISK. Now with the nerf, obviously that will have an impact, and there it is, down to 700 million ISK on the average price. Now it's 697 for the sellers, 625 for the buyers. Still very, very expensive, basically 2 to 3 times as expensive as a Balgorn. But it is of course, whoops, and god damn it, don't hit the microphone too much. It is of course like an incredible PvE platform. I think very versatile. Get that drone damage. That leaves me 1 hour, so that should be fine. It's got that drone damage, it's got that missile output. It's just a crazy good ship, and of course, yeah, for absolutely perfect for those solo conduits with like zero stress, because its passive tank was that strong that even the last wave would not really be able to break your tank or get anywhere close to putting you at risk. So here, I think this is the impact of the conduit nerf. We were 800 to 900 million ISK here, and all of a sudden we're down to 700 million on average, and below that for the sellers. Then we get the Vindicator. That one is also, I think, really popular for the conduits, and we're seeing that exact same effect. Double webs, you saw how effective that is. If you really want to speedrun them, you're not interested in the loot. That's why I personally like the Rattlesnake. You sit there, they can't break you, you destroy everything, you grab all the loot, all the salvage as well. Of course, it's not that good anymore as what we saw when the conduits first came out, but I still feel like that's the way I prefer to play my PvP. If you're there for the ISK payout and for the loyalty points, then the Vindicator makes a lot more sense. Of course, go right on the spawn point, double web, that stuff, 1 to 2 shot, all of these small guys. Make sure you grab that cruiser right off the bat, and then you've got a record time basically for the Vindicator without the risk of smart bombs. I know that with the smart bombing Macarial, you can do some crazy stuff as well, but there's a risk involved to that, with that, of course. And this one is also going down in price, 800 million ISK, and it's currently selling for 683, 584 for the buyers. So this also, I think, the conduit nerf decreasing demand for some of these pirate faction battleships. Super interesting, definitely showing very high value for almost all of those. That does mean that I am probably gonna buy a Balgorn right now, because that one seems super undervalued compared to all the others, and I think it can still do stuff. So yeah, could be something for the upcoming weeks. Let's take a look at the Navy faction battleships. Then we've got the Apocalypse Navy issue that had a little bit of a spike in December up to 450, but right now is going below 350. Yeah, 330 for the first seller, 290 for the buyers. That I would say is definitely below average, so that should mean a MAR, loyalty points being plentiful and inexpensive, so winning out. Let's see what the Armageddon Navy issue is showing us. Oop, close to 1 year low point, getting on that 300 million range. That's interesting. 333 for the sellers, 250 for the buyers. That definitely is pretty cheap. If we get 250 on the chart below everything, potentially that could be worth jumping on. Then the opposite, I'm actually going to go straight to the opposite, which should be Minmatar. So that's the Typhoon fleet issue is actually also down in price. That's completely crazy, of course. And then we get the Tempest fleet issue that is also down in price. What the hell is happening there? Have the Minmatar and the MR made a deal so that everything becomes super plentiful? I don't know. It could just be, of course, that the Minmatar are so out of scope. They got a rapid fire. They should not be out of scope. I'm not really sure what to tell you guys on this one, but this is completely counterintuitive. 329 or 330 for the Tempest fleet issue and 330 million also for the Typhoon fleet issue, 330 million for the Apocalypse Navy issue, and then 333 for the Armageddon Navy issue. Two competing factions that should see a divergence in price are actually meeting each other at a pretty low place. Kind of crazy. Let's see what the Galente and the Caldari battleship market tells us. Galente low point 350 for the Dominic's Navy issue, 380 for the sellers still, but 325 for the buyers. Megatron Navy issue is also decently low in price, not too crazy, but going for 350 on average, 370 to 316. And then let's see if we do have something different here. At least for the Raven Navy issue, we're up to 400 million ISK here, 415 in fact to the sellers, 378 for the buyers. That does indicate that the Galente LP has become cheaper and the Caldari ones has become a bit more expensive. And then the Scorpion Navy issue is also above its low range here at 400 million ISK. At least here the world still makes sense. In the Amar Minmatar theater, I can't make any sense of what's happening here. This is kind of crazy. That would mean that at least one of these is an incredible deal to try to grab. And I think the Armageddon Navy issue here does stand out. Clearly a 1 year low point. 250 million for the buyers is pretty damn low as well. At the exact low point that we had here in September 2, then we had a spike up to 450, and we see the last year we went up to some crazy 800 million ISK shenanigans as well. So if I would have to make one investment here, it would probably be in an Armageddon Navy issue. And yeah, that's going to make it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.